Hey everyone, welcome to KSSP Podcast. I'm Spencer.
And I'm Katie. And today we're going to be talking about laziness in our little series. So, first, what is laziness? The definition is the quality of being unwilling to work or use energy or idleness. And this term is usually used in a negative connotation, but today we're going to challenge that frame of thought.
So, with that, we are also going to be talking about the relationship between mental health and laziness, as well as the relationship between technology and laziness.
And we'll also be providing solutions for what you can do if you're feeling lazy. So, let's get started. For one, laziness doesn't really exist in the way we think it does. Most people aren't actually lazy because they have a desire to contribute to the world. However, there's often underlying factors that prevent them from accomplishing their goals. So I've got a little article here from Human Parts at medium.com. Laziness does not exist, but unseen barriers do. That's the name of the article. So this is from a psychology professor. It's been practicing since 2012, and they don't believe laziness exists. So let's see. I'm a social psychologist, so I'm interested primarily in the situational and contextual factors that drive human behavior. When you're seeking to predict or explain a person's actions, looking at the social norms and person's context is usually a pretty safe bet. Situational constraints typically predict behavior far better than personality, intelligence, or other individual level traits. So when I see a young student failing to complete assignments, missing deadlines, or not delivering results in other aspects of life, I move to ask, what are the situational factors holding the student back? What needs are currently not being met? And when it comes to behavioral laziness, I'm especially moved to ask, what are the barriers to action that I cannot see? There's always barriers. Recognizing those barriers and viewing them as legitimate is often the first step to breaking lazy pattern behaviors. So it's really helpful to respond to a person's ineffective behavior with curiosity rather than judgment. So when you're homeless, the nights are cold, the world is unfriendly, and everything is painfully uncomfortable. When you're sleeping under a bridge in a tent or at a shelter, it's hard to rest easy. You're likely to have injuries or chronic conditions that bother you persistently and little access to medical care to deal with it. You probably don't have much healthy food. In that chronically uncomfortable, overstimulating context, needing a drink or some cigarettes makes sense. As uh, as her friend Kim explained to her, if you're laying out in the freezing cold, drinking some alcohol may be the only way to warm up and get to sleep. Yeah, I've been there. Not with alcohol, but I've been there. If you're undernourished, a few smokes may be the only thing that kills the hunger pains. And if you're dealing with all this while also fighting addiction, then yes, sometimes you just need to score whatever will make the withdrawal symptoms go away so you can survive. Very true. So few people who haven't been homeless think this way. They want to moralize the decisions of poor people, perhaps to comfort themselves about the injustices of the world. For many, it's easier to think homeless people are in part responsible for their suffering than it is to acknowledge the situational factors. And when you don't fully understand a person's context, what it feels like to be them every day, all the small annoyances and major traumas that define their life, it's easy to impose abstract, rigid expectations on a person's behavior. So let's look at a sign of academic laziness that I believe is anything but procrastination. People love to blame procrastinators for their behavior. Putting off work sure looks lazy to an untrained eye. Even people who are actively doing the procrastinating can mistake their behavior for laziness. You're supposed to be doing something and you're not doing it. That's a moral failure, right? That means you're weak-willed, unmotivated, and lazy, doesn't it? For decades, psychological research has been able to explain procrastination as a functioning problem, not a consequence of laziness. When a person fails to begin a project that they care about, it's typically due to either A, anxiety about their attempts not being good enough, or B, confusion about what the first steps of the task are. Sometimes it's both, too, honestly. I've been there. but it's not laziness. In fact, procrastination is more likely when the task is meaningful and the individual cares about doing it well. So when you're paralyzed with the fear of failure, or you don't even know how to begin massive, complicated undertaking, it's hard to get shit done. It has nothing to do with desire, motivation, or moral upstandingness. Procrastinators can will themselves to work for hours. They can sit in front of a blank Word document doing nothing else and torture themselves. They can pile on the guilt again and again. None of it makes initiating the task any easier. In fact, their desire to get the thing done may worsen their stress and make starting the task harder. So the solution instead is to look for what is holding the procrastinator back. If anxiety is a major barrier, the procrastinator actually needs to walk away from the computer, book, Word document, etc., and engage in a relaxing activity. Being branded lazy by other people is likely to lead to the exact opposite behavior, and that is a problem. So often the barrier is that procrastinators have executive functioning challenges. They struggle to divide a large responsibility into a series of discrete, specific, and ordered tasks. Here's an example of executive functioning in action. I completed my dissertation from proposal data collection to final defense in a little over a year. I was able to write my dissertation pretty quickly and easily because I knew I had to compile research on the topic, outline the paper, schedule regular writing periods, and chip away at the paper, section by section, day by day, according to the schedule I'd predetermined. So, in order to track progress, most people require organizational tools such as a to do list, calendar, datebook, or syllabus. Needing or benefiting from such things doesn't make a person lazy, it just means they have needs. So, the more we embrace that, the more we can help people thrive. So, okay, I know, of course, that educators are not taught to reflect on what their students' unseen barriers are. Some universities pride themselves on refusing to accommodate disabled or mentally ill students. They mistake cruelty for an intellectual rigor. And since most professors are people who succeeded academically with ease, they have trouble taking the perspective of someone with executive functioning struggles, sensory overloads, depression, self-harm histories, addictions, or eating disorders. I can see the external factors that lead to these problems, just as I know that lazy behavior is not an active choice. I know that judgmental elitist attitudes are typically born out of situational ignorance. And that's why I'm writing this piece. I'm hoping to awaken my fellow educators of all levels to the fact that if a student is struggling, they probably aren't choosing to. They probably want to do well. They're probably trying. More broadly, I want all people to take a curious and empathetic approach to individuals whom they initially want to judge as lazy or irresponsible. People do not choose to fail or disappoint. No one wants to feel incapable, apathetic, or ineffective. If you look at a person's action or inaction and see only laziness, you are missing key details. There's always an explanation, there's always barriers. Just because you can't see them or don't view them as legitimate doesn't mean they're not there. Look harder. Maybe you weren't always able to look at human behavior this way, but that's okay. And now you can. You can give it a try. So, and that was an opinion piece, of course. But I do agree with pretty much most of what was said. But I do have to say, I I do think there are people who are lazy because they believe others are going to pick up their slack, or they just simply don't care to do more. But the vast majority of us do, in fact, contribute to the world and also manage our personal day to day lives adequately, even if we aren't always doing everything we want to accomplish. This can be due to a variety of circumstances, from putting too much on our plates to mental health issues to physical disabilities and more. So, we're going to talk a little bit about ADHD and laziness. And people who struggle with laziness often have comorbidities to ADHD as well. Or they might not even have ADHD, but they might have another mental health problem that's in their way. So, this is ADHD and laziness. What's really going on from Psych Central. So, if you've been troubling focusing on work or summoning the energy to complete your to dos, it can feel frustrating. It can be all too easy to put yourself down when you can't meet the goals you've set for yourself. In reality, people with ADHD aren't lazy. This myth tends to come from misunderstandings about how ADHD affects people. The low motivation sometimes experienced by people with ADHD is just one of many symptoms associated with the condition. Although I really don't like calling it low motivation because, like, in my mind, I have the drive to do it, but that doesn't transfer to my body all the time. Like, that's how I kind of see it as someone with ADHD.
Okay.
Because it's not like I don't want to do it. I do want to do it. It's just that the physical motivation isn't there. Like I'm not able to. Yeah, I'll explain a little bit more after reread this article, but yeah, it's just a little pet peeve I have about ADHD when people say that is a low motivation. So, ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, is a neurodevelopmental condition characterized by a wide range of symptoms and behaviors, some of which can look like a lack of motivation. So, symptoms: trouble focusing on tasks or becoming so focused on activity you lose track of time, difficulty paying attention and being easily distracted, moving from one activity or task to another without completing them, impulsive behaviors that may result in negative consequences, regularly forgetting items or appointments, low motivation to begin tasks, especially ones that don't interest you. That's a big part of it, is interest. Our minds, the ADHD mind prioritizes interest over importance. And that's the problem. Like we're more motivated on interest than we are motivated by importance. Like something can be really, really important to us, but it's not going to be prioritized if it's not interesting. So it might not end up getting done, even if it's more important than what we are doing. So that is a way that the brain is more neurodivergent in that sense. So there's deficits in executive dysfunction. So according to researchers in 2020, adults with ADHD showed deficits in executive function and different types of attention. So yeah, executive functioning is the ability to plan, remember instructions, and carry out tasks to completion. So there's differences in brain chemistry. So a study using mice suggests certain neurotransmitters, notably dopamine, may play a role in motivation for people living with ADHD. So lower levels of this neurotransmitter affect reward centers in the brain, causing a lack of enthusiasm for starting or completing tasks. So the research suggests altered patterns in the dopamine pathway may be one reason you might have difficulty with motivation if you have ADHD. So this study found that those with ADHD had difficulty with selective attention and divided attention. So this supports the idea of focusing on an activity or multiple sources of information for a relatively long and undisturbed time can be difficult for adults with ADHD. So it can appear to be a lack of motivation when in reality it's a manifestation of ADHD symptoms. So symptoms differ between adults and children and between men and women, males and females rather. It's sometimes difficult to determine on your own if what you're experiencing is ADHD. So for women, ADHD is often diagnosed because there's just this stereotype of the ADHD little boy who's running around the classroom, Like an ADHD doesn't necessarily, what's it called? It doesn't form itself in that way in women. Like women experience ADHD differently than men, so it's harder for them to get diagnosed because they don't necessarily fit the stereotype all the time. They don't have that like external hyperactivity that you really notice, like running around and shit like that. So yeah, there's tests online you can take if you think you have ADHD. But if you don't have ADHD, what's causing lack of motivation? Well, it could be complex trauma or CPTSD, and it can cause symptoms and behaviors similar to ADHD, including lack of motivation and impulsivity. So if you experience prolonged and repeat trauma and now feel unfocused or foggy, you're not the only one. You can manage your CPSD. And then there's depression, tiredness, low motivation, a lack of focus. And then if you have these symptoms for 2 weeks or longer, it could be depression, sadness, hopelessness, and loss of interest in activities you used to enjoy. Then there's anxiety disorders. These symptoms can make it harder to begin or complete tasks, trouble concentrating, restlessness, and difficulty remembering things. And finally, existential crisis. This is questioning your place in life. That can also cause reduced motivation. So if you have trouble finding meaning in your work or feel like you've lost direction in life, this can lead to low enthusiasm. And the feelings are usually temporary. Once you find your focus point again, identify your goals, your motivation will likely increase naturally. So, yeah, that was that article. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about executive dysfunction. So, okay, the best way I can describe it is it's a paralyzation of the brain. So, it's kind of like when you see that rainbow swirl on your MacBook, like the loading screen, like our brains are trying to load, but we can't load to the point of motivation where we begin the task. Like basically being stuck in your head, like being paused. Your head is paused, and we have the motivation to want to do the task, but we don't have the physical motivation to begin or complete the task. Like at least that's just me speaking from personal experience, though. So
Yeah, I, that makes sense to me too. And the next, the next thing we're just going to briefly discuss with mental health and laziness is homelessness briefly. So, as it was mentioned, I think a little bit in your one article,
yes,
homeless people obviously aren't lazy. There's just a bunch of different situational barriers and factors that contribute obviously to homelessness, but also that make them appear as lazy because again, people use that term derogatorily rather
yes,
than effectively to like help with change. But so, homeless people who are often thought of as lazy, a lot of times, as we discussed in our homelessness episode, are still working. And there are full time workers who do not have homes, that making them homeless, or by definition, homeless. Although some of them might be like, it depends on
because there's like
some,
homeless
yeah,
people who are couch surfing. Some people live in their cars. Like
yeah,
they're not necessarily on the streets, but they're still homeless.
yes. So, 2021 study from the University of Chicago estimates that 53% of people living in homeless shelters and 40% of unsheltered people were employed, either full or part time, in the year that people were observed homeless between 2011 to 2018. So, as we can see, a majority of people who are perceived of as lazy have other struggles that prevent them from accomplishing their goals. So, first, we're going to go over some of the benefits of technology and automation, and that can be anything from. Well, we'll just go over them. So, first, we have some points here. The point of technology is innovation, which makes our lives easier. Technology does not inherently make us lazy. Instead, it allows us to have more free time than ever before. We can utilize this time to not only rest and relax, but create and innovate. The same argument can be made towards automation. With automation, it allows people to avoid working degrading jobs that typically are low pay with unfavorable conditions. Automation creates better jobs as well. Typically, most of the technological advancements made us more efficient rather than lazy. Technology opens up new possibilities where hard workers are able to become more efficient. It all depends on the individual's mindset and how you look at things. So, some technological advancements we're going to just briefly go over here are medicine. Technological advancements in medicine prolong our lifespan, and engineers are creating new inventions that could make our life a lot easier. Another invention here is the electric light bulb, which has allowed us to be productive in the dark. Agricultural advancements have led to higher crop productivity. And then we also, in our technological day and age, have had newer advancements such as Slack and social media sites, which have helped us in some ways. Social media has helped people from around the world to connect, share ideas, and even form groups that work to change society for the better. And then Slack, which is an instant messaging program developed for professional and organizational communications, similar to Discord, allows us to stay connected even outside of work. It allows you to put your ideas out there when you have them so that you don't forget them. And then the whole team is able to look at those ideas when they have free time. All of these advancements have helped give us more time, which we can utilize for art, philosophy, math, and science. These advancements also allow us to accomplish more things in a day than ever before.
So, on the flip side, the technology can also be negative. It can have a negative impact at times. So, number one, it can create distractions. Like all the constant notifications can take your focus away from your work. And some employers might expect you to be reachable 24/7. Um, so, it can be addictive. Certain kinds of technology can be addictive, which also will take us away from being productive. Technology addiction can be defined as frequent and obsessive technology related behavior, increasingly practiced despite negative consequences to the user of the technology. And while it can be addictive, occasional social media use isn't necessarily harmful just because we aren't productive. When it starts to take over your life more is when it becomes a problem. So, with social media, it can increase incidence of anxiety, stress, depression, body image concerns, and loneliness in teens and young adults. And it also increases the likelihood of misinformation, which can lead to harmful ideologies and a misinformed public in general. So, with Slack, I'll talk a little bit more about that. So while Slack can be a very useful tool, it also can make us slaves to our workplace 24/7. When we're expected to immediately reply at all hours of the day, are we truly free from our employers? Or are we enslaved, considering that especially those not on a salary are not paid for additional time communicating for work relations, and even those on salary are not necessarily compensated for this time either?
So, as we can see, technology can be beneficial, but that doesn't mean there could be some negatives to it as well.
So we're going to talk about some tips on how to reframe your mind. This is an article from Open Heart Holistic Therapy. It's called You Aren't Lazy, Ways to Reframe Your Mindset. This is important. Your worth is not based on your productivity, and rest is not a reward. I'm going to say it one more time because it's really important. Your worth is not based on your productivity. Rest is not a reward. So there seem to be several often unspoken rules that circulate in our society about rest, or what other people might call laziness. These rules might include that you have to earn your rest, you must demonstrate the need for rest through your productivity, a nap is only okay if you are sick or completely exhausted, and you can relax on your allotted 2 weeks a year vacation. If you're privileged and lucky enough to even have a 2 week vacation, because a lot of people don't. So the lie in all these rules is that relaxation is always lazy and selfish. That's why we reward ourselves for all our hard work with rest on the weekends or vacation. Laziness is a warning sign from our body and mind that something needs to change. So we got to start with self-compassion. You can try saying statements to yourself such as, I'm only human, I'm doing the best I can, I deserve rest, I am worthy even when I rest, I need to rest for my well being. My family won't think less of me if I rest. And if they will, then that's their problem and not yours. So, dumping the guilt. So, some things if you tend to overthink when relaxing and doing nothing feels hard, you can consider taking a bath, reading a book, talking to a friend or relative, working on a hobby, stopping the scroll and hiding your phone away for an afternoon, and anything that isn't working or about productivity. You just got to let yourself relax because rest is productive. You have to tell yourself that to enhance your productivity, you need to rest. Think of rest as another crucial item on your to do list. You nap, your walk, or time to read your favorite book are all in service of your greater health and productivity. By prioritizing rest, you are prioritizing your job, your family, and yourself. So, rested mind and body will show up to work whether at your job or home. Energized, focused, and prepared to tackle the challenges and tasks that come their way, and that leads to better productivity. And you need to make rest non-negotiable. You deserve rest no matter how hard you work. It's not contingent on your productivity on any given day, and it's not a competition. and you aren't lazy. No matter how hard you work, taking time to rest doesn't make you lazy. So the next time you feel guilty or are beating yourself up for taking rest, remind yourself that you're giving your body and mind time to heal and recuperate. Think of rest as the medicine your body needs to be creative, productive, and energized. Most importantly, be kind to yourself because you deserve it. So that was the article for that. And something I'm going to add on to that. Because we're taught from a young age that rest is unproductive due to living in a capitalist society that prioritizes physical productivity over our own physical well-being, it's very hard to reframe our thinking in these ways. But it's important to know that if you're not able to properly rest, productivity rates actually begin to decrease. So it is ultimately in everyone's best interest to allow others and ourselves to have adequate time for decompression. And you can rest more and do less to improve your productivity. So let's see about that. So productivity is formally defined as the amount of output per worker. The Oh, by the way, this is rest more and do less to improve your productivity by Brightwork. Okay, I'll start again. So productivity is formally defined as the amount of output per worker. The productivity of a factory worker making footballs, for example, could be measured by how many footballs they make in 1 hour. Although productivity has become increasingly equated with longer working hours in recent times, research indicates that productivity levels are falling in many economies. We know working longer hours reduce outputs and leads to poor decisions, mistakes, less creativity, and various health problems. Many Japanese workers work more than 60 hours of overtime each week, yet the contributing value productivity of each individual is the lowest among the industrialized countries. By contrast, countries with shorter working weeks, like Luxembourg, Norway, and France, now rank as highly as productive by the OECD. Just going to show a graphic really quick. So this is productivity slowdown in advanced economies, GDP per hour worked, percent change at an annual rate. So it looks like it used to be a lot higher from 1996 to 2004. And from 2004 to 2014, it's gotten a little lower, a lot lower in some countries. Like the USA, it's like half of what it used to be. Our brain can only concentrate for 13 hours after we wake up, with creativity lasting for about 6 hours a day. So research from University of California, Irvine shows productivity rises in late morning around 11 a.m. and peaks between 2 and 3 p.m. The next time you consider staying late at the office to get some extra work, don't. It won't pay off in the long run. So there's many reasons why modern employees feel pressure to work long hours. An increasingly connected global economy, the rise of contract and short-term roles, the emergence of an always-on work culture due to technological advances. Some even argue that focus on time management skills and techniques is to blame. Individuals are required to be hyper-productive and efficient. Any extra time, even time off, is quickly filled with more tasks and obligations. So, a review of working habits of famously productive people reveals an interesting trend. They only spent a few hours each day working, with significantly more time devoted to leisure time and family. Whilst we tend to associate good ideas with hours of work, history offers a different lesson. Let's see. Why is leisure so important to productivity? Leisure and time away from work give us time to reflect and think about our experiences, to make connections between events, and tap into our creativity. Indeed, the Greek word for leisure pronounced the Latin scola, which became the English word school. Learning and reflection define leisure, not laziness or idleness, as we sometimes think. Okay. So, there's the idea that 10,000 hours of deliberate practice leads to mastery. It's an attractive idea. Log the hours and reap the rewards. It worked for the Beatles, who perfected their skills by playing more than 300 times a year for 4 straight years in the same German concert hall. All right, however, a study of German violinist students in 1980, it's kind of an old study, but okay, it reveals something else. It doesn't mean it's not valuable, but it would be nice to have a newer study. But the students were highly motivated, practiced deliberately and with purpose, and took frequent breaks. Each practice session lasted around 90 minutes with short breaks, exercise, and an afternoon nap. They also slept for longer each night than their counterparts. So these students were engaged in their work for about 4 hours per day. Rest, not constant practice, allowed these students to hone their creative skills. The equation for success is closer to 10,000 hours of deliberate practice, 12,500 hours of deliberate rest, and 30,000 hours of sleep. Okay. Finally, so a few ideas to get started with a new approach. Sleep. Sleep deprivation reduces productivity and leads to long-term health problems. There are many easy ways to invest in your sleep routine. Avoid using mobile devices for about 30 minutes before going to bed. Read a book and reduce your caffeine intake throughout the day. Disconnect from work. Use your evenings and weekends to switch off from work as much as possible. Ideally, don't check your emails or do any extra work. If you really need to, try to set aside a specific book of time to do so and stop at the allocated time. Separating work and home environments will help you enjoy your leisure time. Recharge your physical and mental energy. Unlike time, we can easily top our physical and mental energy levels. Tips include reviewing your diet and exercise habits, practicing gratitude, and giving time to others. Take vacations, if you can, anyways. Many executive managers and other employees are work martyrs. They believe they're so indispensable to the company that they cannot step away for a week or even a couple days. Of course, we know that mindset reduces productivity. If you are struggling to take time away from work, why not build and empower your team to keep the project running smoothly in your absence? So schedule gaps in your calendar. Like Dickens, Darwin's, and many others, Warren Buffett has a famously sparse calendar, which allows him to think deeply throughout his day. Schedule some gaps or slack in your calendar to think and respond to unexpected challenges. All right. So, in our stress episode, we talked about the negative health effects of stress. These health effects include overworking ourselves as well. Like a computer that gets too hot, if you're using too much power at once, our bodies start to fail as we overwork ourselves. We need time to rest in order to increase our productivity.
Yes, very important. Another thing, also, I think that's important to consider when talking about what can be done to help productivity is what businesses can do. One option that businesses can implement is a 4-day work week. Most of the companies that participated in a 4-day work week pilot program in Britain said they had seen no loss of productivity during the experiment and in some cases had seen a significant improvement. There were some benefits that have been shown after trialing 4-day work weeks, and those include better work life balance, people have more free time, there's improved employee well being, lower stress, higher satisfaction, and some businesses have even reported an increase in revenue after trialing programs like 4-day work weeks. Now, we don't always have to come up with the answers to our problems ourselves. We can also look at what other countries are doing. So, we'll go to a typical Spanish working day tends to be from around 8:30 a.m. or 9 a.m. to around 1:30 p.m. and then from 4:30 p.m. or 5 p.m. to around 8 p.m. The famous siesta, whilst declining in the larger cities, is still a major part of the working day in Spain, according to business culture. Meanwhile, in Finland, Monday to Friday office hours are usually between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Lunch is eaten between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. and lasts between 1 and 2 hours. At lunch, what might strike you is that the business talk seems to go on. Finns love to do business, and during business hours, there is no time for small talk. And then all employees in Belgium, whether they work in the public or the private sector, will have the choice of working 9.5 hours a day over 4 days or 8 hours a day over 5 days, according to Euronews. So, overall, giving people freedom within their time is very liberating, and this liberation will ultimately lead to healthier people and more productivity.
So, the capitalist way of thinking makes us think that our bodies are commodities to be used for profit. However, this is an unhealthy mindset to have as it causes high levels of stress for anyone who's not living up to their own expectations of this. Our bodies should not be commodities, but rather tools we use ourselves and that we care for. We should be free to form our mindsets and ultimately our lives outside of economics. Yes, maintaining the economy is important, but it's not the only goal we should have as human beings.
Yeah. And I guess for me, I don't personally believe in laziness. For me, it's hard for me to believe that if someone wasn't struggling either with a mental illness or not feeling like they have control in their life due to living in a capitalist society where a majority of the people suffer while the top excel, that people would still choose to sit around 24/7 and watch TV, or, the typical trope of what people consider as laziness. Because I personally, if somebody wants to sit around and watch TV 24/7, I don't have a problem with that. I wouldn't even consider that lazy if it wasn't affecting their rest of their life, I guess. To me, then that just becomes more of, are they suffering from an addiction, mental illness, or something like that, rather than them just being like, so I just do not like the term lazy because I feel like people use it to, in a derogatory way, to excuse, like, or just like not to help people. They don't use it to help people. They use it to hurt people. And instead of being like, oh, that person's lazy, maybe we should figure out what's going on and how we can help them. They're like, oh, that person's lazy. They just don't deserve the same rights I do, and they are less than me. And I just cannot get on board with that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, the judgment doesn't help anybody. Like, you have
Mm-hmm.
to find the root of the problem if you want anything to change. You can't shame people into changing, just in general. Like, shaming people into changing doesn't work. It's not healthy and it's not productive. You need to find the root of the problem. And for me, as far as laziness go, like, I do think there are a small minority of people who are lazy in the sense that they purposely avoid doing things because they know others are going to pick up the slack for them. And I think the way we commonly think of laziness is outdated and wrong. Laziness is procrastination more than anything else, and this can be attributed to a wide variety of factors that are difficult or even impossible to control. And the fact is that a large majority of people want to contribute as much as possible to society, as it inherently gives us satisfaction to do so. And this is because humans are social creatures, and cognitive social creatures need social interaction and influence to feel satisfied with their lives.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I guess I see it more as like a manipulation tactic than laziness, but I see definitely what you're saying. They are, because they know they'll get away with it. Like
Yeah,
they are like, I am going to have this other person do more work because I know I can get away with it. But it still is a laziness for sure. But I just don't like the term lazy, but
yeah,
I see what you are saying there for sure. And then just from some things that I thought of while we were going over like our other videos was definitely situational barriers. I think those are important to take into consideration when, like how we mentioned, describing people as lazy. There's a whole list of reasons, and you need to figure out the root of the issue, I guess, is what it really comes down to for me. You can't just go around calling someone lazy and then judging them for that without trying to understand their perspective. And that is also where, to me, it comes in. Like if I were to, and this is my own personal bias, but I personally would not be happy sitting down and watching TV 24/7. If I had all my basic needs met and could do whatever I wanted, chase whatever dreams I had, that would not be one of my dreams.
yeah,
But if that is someone's dream, that's okay. I would never judge someone for that. But I just feel like more people have dreams, and like, or things that they want to do. Maybe not even dreams as big as dreams, but just things that they would do if they had the time. Whereas, because when I was a nurse and during COVID, I was working 4 or 5 12-hour shifts a week. So, what did I do on my 2 to 3 days off? Well, I sat and watched TV all day. But that's mainly because I was overworking myself. I shouldn't have been doing that. And it also came down to the fact that that's what I mean, granted, that part was rest. Part of that was rest, and that's okay. So the rest is okay too. We have to understand that rest is okay, as we've mentioned. But it came down to like I wasn't. It's not what I wanted my life to be, but I also felt trapped because I need a job. I need money. We live in a society where I can't necessarily chase my dreams or my passions or what I truly want to do in life if they're not bringing me money, or at least that's like the common belief in our society,
Yeah.
And so I guess to me, what I would use watching TV for is because I felt it was impossible to achieve what I wanted rather than putting in minimal, the little bit of time that maybe I did have, like maybe an hour a day towards maybe what I want to achieve, because it didn't feel worth it either. So I feel like that's an aspect too, because it's like, well, if I want to maybe write a book, I'll like with in this capitalist society, I only have an hour a day, if even, and maybe an hour a month to take time to write this book, and that's going to take eons, or it feels like it'll take ages.
Yeah.
So then it feels like it's not even worth it, because then will I even ever finish it? Will it? And then if I finish it, will I have time to edit it after that? Like, so that
Yeah.
aspect to me would always come into play.
Yes.
So it's hard for me to put myself into the shoes of somebody who actually is quote unquote lazy and wants to watch, because I feel like people have things that they want to do in life.
Yes.
It's just hard to do those things. And then with that, I also know that we were talking about motivation with ADHD, and I guess I agree with that, because I don't like the lack. But what I was wondering with that for you, my question to you was,
Yeah.
because you know how they use lack of, and you didn't like that
Right.
terminology, and I agree with that. Like, I don't like necessarily the lack of, in the sense that they're saying we have the lack of motivation if it's our interest, but would you agree that maybe we have a lack of motivation to do those boring tasks?
Um, yeah, I guess it depends what the boring task is and how important it is. Because I think while we do prioritize interest over importance, that doesn't mean that we don't categorize importance of things. So I think it just depends on how important the task is to you, in terms of motivation. Now, whether you actually do it or not, like I said, will depend more on interest than importance. But like it's important to note that we still do hold things, like we still do have a hierarchy of priorities and what's important to us. So I just don't like the term lack of motivation, because it's not that the motivation isn't there, like we want to do it, but at the same time, because we don't have the interest, it's more of a lack of interest than a lack of motivation, I guess.
Yeah, I guess I would. Yeah, I think that I would agree with that too, because I think it is the lack of interest, which then people can be like, well, then obviously you're not going to be motivated to do things that you aren't interested in. But some of it comes down to the fact that we know we have to do it,
Right.
so we still do it. We just don't do it how other people do it. Because I guess I would maybe argue that who likes to do laundry? A lot of people probably don't like to do laundry,
Yeah.
but they have more of, I don't even want to say drive, but it's just easier for them to do those. I don't know why interests
Yeah.
play a
And
huge like role in ADHD per se, and not in like a good or bad way. It's just a
that's just the way it is.
thing. Yeah.
And I think it's important to remember that, like, interest and importance are two different things, but they both are still present in ADHD. They're just ranked differently than in the neurotypical brain, where importance takes over interest most of the time.
in, in ADHD.
In the neurotypical brain, the importance takes.
Oh, okay, yeah. Um, yeah, I guess yeah. So I also don't think lack of motivation is really the appropriate way, personally, in my opinion,
Yeah.
to define it either. Um, because it's also because I also feel like that term lack of motivation insinuates laziness,
Yeah.
and it's not with ADHD. It's not a choice either. We don't choose to prioritize interests over importance either. Like, that's not a choice, you
Right.
know? Like, I feel like it may seem like a choice, because they can be like, oh, well, you are choosing to draw versus doing your laundry, but it isn't. Like, it's not as easy as just being like it's a choice. You know what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say? It's
Oh,
hard
I
to
know what
explain,
you
but
mean.
it's not a choice. Like,
Right.
we're not intentionally choosing to prioritize interests over importance. That is not an intentional decision. It is just
Right.
the way the brain functions.
Exactly. It's just the way it's wired.
Yes. So then another thing I thought was interesting when we were going over them was just that existential crisis and just our society, because I feel like that plays a big role in why I have a hard time believing that laziness exists, because
Mhm.
it's hard to, we don't really have any up, like in your jobs you may not have upward mobility, as we talked about with like wage slavery. So you again don't have the, to me it again boils down to like, why would I do anything other than like lounge around and like, but rest is important, so I'm not trying to diminish rest. I'm just saying that if we had our basic needs met, people would still rest, and we should still rest. Rest is important, but I don't think people would, like, some people just have this un or this they have this, what am I trying to, how am I, what word am I, whatever, they have this fear that if we have our basic needs met, that a majority of society is gonna like do nothing Monday through Sunday. And I disagree with that fear. I think it is irrational, because most of society does like to be productive in different ways, and everybody's way is important to a productive society, but most people like to be productive. People are not just going to not do things if we have our base. There may be some. I'm not going to say
Yeah.
there wouldn't be some people, but then we have to understand, like, look at their perspective and try to
Right.
understand why.
And it's
Because
not,
then there may be a reason, an underlying reason why.
yeah. And like, it's not only profit driven productivity either. There's all kinds of productivity.
Yes. And then when we were going over technology, I just personally feel that technology will actually help with innovation by freeing up time, because my friends and I, a while ago, were having a debate argument about, I think it was Roombas and like electric lawnmowers, because I was like, why wouldn't, like, I think the government should provide everyone with a Roomba and electric lawnmower, because why should people have to mow their lawn? And then they were telling me that, well, that's going to make people lazy. And I just, we very much disagreed, because to
Mhm.
me, I don't think that vacuuming your floors is necessary. If we can have the technology that can do that for us, I don't think that's going to lead to laziness. I think personally that will free up time for people to be more creative and give them more time to potentially come up with new innovation and technology or whatever it is. And to me, that is important. And the other thing about that to me is it's okay for life to get easier. It should. Life should be getting easier as we evolve as a society. It shouldn't get harder, or it shouldn't stay the same either. And just overall with technology, for me, I personally believe the benefits will outweigh the negatives. And I understand that there are negatives, and we can definitely address those and how we can address those, but I don't think that we should prevent progress in the name of the negative, like just because there are potential negative side effects or negative things that can come along with progress and technology making life easier. I don't think we should not progress due to those.
Right. And I just have one other thing I wanted to mention about this too. We didn't really talk about this in the other videos, but I'm just gonna bring it up now, about my opinion. Like, and I might be a little biased here, obviously, but like overweight people are often thought of as lazy, but people can be overweight for a wide variety of reasons, including lack of time or resources to exercise, medical conditions or medications, and genetics. And we shouldn't really judge people based on their appearance, anyways. We should just judge them based on what they're contributing to the world and what they're going to contribute to the world, potentially. So
Yeah.
I had a couple questions for you. I'll just ask them all at once because they kind of go together. Like, have you ever thought you were lazy? How did that make you feel, and why did you feel that way?
So I guess that's a hard. So I've never thought of myself as lazy, but I do feel that others may perceive me as lazy. And I think that's also why I had such a strong a reaction when my friends and I were having that discussion is because obviously I like a Roomba. I would easily buy a robot lawnmower because why wouldn't I? So
Right.
to me, when they were saying that that makes you lazy, like I took it as a personal attack. And like obviously I know it wasn't, but I couldn't help that I was taking that as a personal attack because to me, I am more of a I like I like to do things that require mental activity versus physical activity, and I feel like sometimes that can be seen as lazy, you know? Like
Yeah.
I would rather sit and write a story or draw or research or do things that aren't necessarily physical. And I feel like a lot of times people, because obviously when I'm doing that, I'm going to be potentially sitting down on a desk or compute or like on a computer, you know, and I feel like people could see that and then be like, oh, well, he's just lazy because he doesn't want to do any physical thing, you know, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Or sometimes when I was working so much and taking those days off to just rest, I would just lounge around the house and watch TV. And I feel like that could be perceived as lazy too. But
Yeah.
I personally have never felt so I don't think I'm lazy, but I think others from the outside looking in could perceive me as lazy. And obviously that hurts because, like, we all contribute to society, whether people
Yeah.
want to see that or not. Um,
Right.
we're all important too. Even to me, the person who maybe does just want to watch TV 24/7, they're still important. They don't matter any less or more than I do.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's important for people to understand because we're all important, whether and that's why I hate the term lazy too because people use it derogatorily
Yeah.
as if they're better than the other person, but in my opinion, you are worse than the other person when you call them lazy.
Yeah. Because you're judging them for something that, has a lot of systemic and root issues that need to be
Yes.
solved.
And honestly to me, it if you're going to go around calling someone lazy because they want to watch TV all day, you're just jealous that they can do that. Because
Right.
when I see somebody watching TV all day, I don't go around being like, oh, they're so lazy. Oh, they're so. Because why? Why? I don't care. They're
Yeah.
doing what they want to do. I'm doing what I want to do. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like,
I completely agree.
oh, it's just so frustrating because
Yeah.
there's no,
As
no,
long as they're not like leeching off of other people to get their needs met, then I'm fine with it. Like as long as they're getting their own needs met, then that's cool. I don't care if you watch TV all day.
yes.
It's just a problem when like you're forcing someone to have you rely on them. That's when it's a problem.
Yeah, no, that's, and
Like
to
if you're
me,
not doing that, if you're just single person living at your own apartment and watching TV all day, like that's cool with me. I don't really care.
and I guess I always wonder, why would you care? If
Yeah.
they're, as long as they're not leeching off of people, but to me, that becomes more of like manipulation and
Yeah.
to me, I don't really like. That's why I don't really personally just consider that lazy because it's they're doing that like evilly, intentionally. They're not
Right.
necessarily doing it because they want to be lazy per se. They're doing it because they know they can get away with it. Like if
Yeah.
people stopped helping them with their basic need, like not in the way because I feel like a lot of people think about that with like government assistance programs. Like they think the people in
Yeah.
government assistance programs are lazy, but some of them are. I'm not going to say that some of them aren't necessarily maybe using that to their advantage and but also like we don't I feel we'll talk about it or we did I guess technically we would have by this but we don't fund those programs. The government funds its own programs. If it's a federal assistance program, taxes aren't funding it. So you are not funding that lazy person. The government is. So
Yeah.
that's irrelevant either way because we're not funding that. But then there could be, and I'm assuming a majority of those people probably have mental comorbid mental health issues that we need
Oh
to
yeah.
address. It isn't as simple as someone just is taking advantage of the system, you know.
Oh yeah. There's so many people out there who have undiagnosed mental health issues, whether it's just a lack of access or a lack of knowledge, Like, there's all kinds of different reasons why people don't get adequate mental health care that they need.
Yes, it's a very nuanced. And I
Yes.
think when people define it as the term lazy, they just ignore all that nuance, and that upsets me because it's it's just really annoying because all it is an attempt to it's kind of like when we talked about cults, when we talked about homeless people, they're just trying to build an us versus them mentality in a way, and I don't like that. I don't think that is constructive to society. I don't think that's going to help us evolve as a society. I don't think that's going to help anything because when you're going around calling people lazy, okay, well, what do we do about it? Like, are you just going to go around call them lazy and then say that they should be locked up or kicked out of America? Like, what's your solution?
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
that's what I just hate people. Not people. I just hate when people do that because
Yeah. Well, you know what their
we need to
solution,
have a solution. You can't go around whining about things without having a solution. In
right?
my
Like,
at least, and it doesn't have to be a full thought out solution. And whining is fine. I'm not going to say we can't. Like, we can vent and whine every once in a while, but if you're going to go around constantly complaining about laziness, then come up with a solution, because
right.
I'll listen to you once and I'll be there for to listen to you for once when you want to complain about it. But if you literally keep harking the same issues over and over but don't offer solutions, then I'm not going to listen anymore.
Yeah, well, and then their solution is, oh, that person just needs to fix it themselves when there's so many like systemic issues and situational issues that are like out of their control that we need to fix as a society.
Yes, and especially if it is like a mental health thing, you
Yeah,
can't you can you can't just fix a mental health issue. But also, yes, the systemic issues, you can't just fix those yourself either. That is going
right,
to take a systemic change to
right.
address those.
We need systemic change in the government and then systemic change in our medical care system where we can provide that mental health medical care to the people who need it.
Yes, definitely. So that is definitely why I have always had a very disdain
Yeah,
towards the word laziness, because I just don't like when people go around using derogatory terms, obviously, but then going around using those derogatory terms without coming up with solutions to fix what clearly they think is an issue. Because clearly, if someone is going around complaining about laziness, then they must think it's an issue. So
right.
let's think of ways to solve it.
Exactly.
But yes, I think
Yeah.
that's my thoughts on laziness.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah. So you guys can leave a comment below letting us know what topics you want us to cover in future episodes.
You can reach out to us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and we occasionally do Twitch live streams, so watch out for us there.
And don't forget to like, follow, or subscribe, and turn on notifications so that you know when we do. Otherwise, we will see everyone next time.